Hello and welcome to GK videos. In this video I'm going to demonstrate on how to create or configure FTP on Iomega Lenovo EMC storage devices. So for my video purpose, I'm going to use an IX2 device with the firmware version running 4.0.8 and the IP address is 192.168.0.20. So this video would also be applicable on all the IX and PX series of Lenovo Iomega EMC storage devices. So whatever device you have, it doesn't matter. IX2, IX2DL, IX2-200 Cloud Edition, IX4 Cloud Edition, IX4 300D, PX12, IX12. So the default ports are 20 and 21 for FTP. And I'm going to talk about the access permissions on shares on Iomega Lenovo EMC device and how do you use that with FTP configuration. So let us get started. I've opened up my NAS web console, and as you can see, the icons whatever available on my screen on my NAS device are similar, pretty much similar across all the devices of Lenovo EMC or Iomega NAS storage devices. If you have a cloud device, the screen would look like similar. There is no change at all. So the first thing what I gotta do is I need to enable the FTP service on my NAS. How do I do that? Let me do that. In order to enable the FTP service, I have to get into network. Click on protocols, and as you can see, the FTP service is by default disabled. So if I need to enable it on, then I just need to click on here and it's turned on. Now I'll click on settings. So FTP is enabled, and I'm gonna also enable Sftp because this is secure file transfer protocol. The major difference between these two protocols is FTP, when you enter your username and password over the FTP client, the username and password gonna travel on the network with text-based format, which means the username password will be visible to anybody who hacks your network or whoever in your network. And that is the main problem with FTP. So when you enable Sftp, this is gonna encrypt your username and password, the credentials traveling over your network. And one more thing I have to tell you here, if you're gonna have to enable Sftp, you make sure that the NAS has security enabled. If you enable security on the NAS device, which means you are creating your username and password to access the NAS device to authenticate. In that case, it should be you should be able to enable it. But when you try to enable it without enabling security, it's going to give you a message saying that first you need to enable security, then you can enable Sftp. Since I've already enabled security, I can just go ahead and apply, and it's going to process for me. So now the FTP service is enabled on my NAS device. So the second step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to log into the NAS device using FTP. How do I do that? Let me just show you that. So I'll just open up another browser of Internet Explorer and type FTP:// my NAS IP address, enter, and you see I've just connected it, and what I see here is this is the old entry. Possibly I would have logged in earlier, so let me just clear the browser cache information and let me open that again, because that is what happens with Internet Explorer browser. It just stores the cache information, the frequent sites you access, and it's going to show you that information. Okay, so now this is the latest information what I can see. So the FTP client has connected to the NAS server to the root, and to view this FTP site in Windows Explorer, click page and then click open FTP site in Windows Explorer. So this is a known information about Internet Explorer. When you try to access the FTP site from Windows Explorer, this is the default message you should get. And what it basically says that in order to view it perfectly in Windows Explorer, go to page. I'm gonna go to page and I'm gonna click on open FTP site in Windows Explorer. Let me click on that. Okay, so this is the FTP site, and you can see I can see one share which I am having default permission. So what it means basically, let me just open up these shares and let me show you that. Okay, so for that, go to storage. Now go to shares. Alright, so now what I can see here, I have backups, documents, movies, music, picture, shared media. These all are shares on the NAS device, and as you can see, these shares are protected, and the folder GK or this share GK is not being protected. Let me see the access permission for this share. When I go to access permission, blah, it has read and read write access to everyone, which means whoever in my network is trying to access the NAS device, he should be able to access this particular share, since it has everyone access. But whereas the other shares, let me just open that. If I'm checking for backup share, it has only admin access. So what basically happens here is when you access the FTP server, initially it's not going to prompt for any username and password. So it's going to use the anonymous username, and that's where it just logs into the NAS device, and it checks if there are any shares which are having access to everyone. So those shares gonna visible here. If all these shares are protected, then it will not show you any information here, and only robots.txt. So the GK has everyone access, it is showing here, and the other shares are not visible. So now what you have to do is, for example, you have a user called test, and you want to give access to some particular shares to that user called test, and how do you have him log in? So in my case, this is the Windows Explorer which is connected to the FTP site, and let me just give some permissions to, or maybe create an account and give permissions to that user. I'm gonna go to all features and go to users and shares. I'm sorry, users and groups icon. So once I get in here, I can create a user account here. So okay, so since test is already a user account being created on this NAS device, let me give access to test. I'm gonna expand it, go to access permission, and what I can see is music and pictures are already being given access to test. So in that case, let me just log in with the account test. And one more thing I want to tell you here, the access permissions, basically you can give two ways. One, you can go to users and groups and select that particular user account and go to access permission. Here you can basically click on add access permission. You can select whatever the share you want to give access to that particular user. And the other option you have, go to storage, and once you get into storage, click on shares. Alright, under share you can expand any of the share, for example movies, and go to access permission. And here once you click on add access permission, you're gonna see all the users available on your NAS device. So here in my case I have test account, so click on test, apply. So here we go. So the test has now default read and read write access. So you can basically uncheck the device if you want the option, just in case if you want to give only read access to any particular share to any user in your NAS device. In my case, I'm going to cancel this. Okay, so now the test has access to music and pictures. So in my case, for example, if I have a user account or maybe user, and I'm giving access to that particular user, saying, hey, you have the user account of test and the password on the NAS device I've just created for you, and how does he access? So the first thing he's gonna do is he'll have to open up a Windows or maybe Internet Explorer and FTP :/ the NAS IP address, and this is the page you're gonna get, and he has to get into the page and open FTP site in Windows Explorer. Then this is the page you're gonna get. So here what you're gonna do is on the blank space, right click, and you can find the option login as. Click on that option and it's gonna prompt you for username and password. So I'm gonna log in with test credentials, and now let me see if I have access to any of these shares. Yes, so as you can see, I have access to these many shares, and GK has everyone access, so it will be visible to everybody, and these 3 shares I have access. So I click, I can create any folder or read and write any data, it doesn't matter. You want to delete it, I can delete from here. Yes, delete, and I can get into this and I can view all the share data on it, or maybe I can create one more. Folder, yes, I've done it. So I'm able to read, write, modify anything. But remember one thing, this is the root folders, which means these are the shares. So you cannot create any of the folder on the root folder, which means here if I want to create a folder, it gives me the permission denied message, because I do not have access to this particular root folder. This is owned by the NAS operating system, and even I cannot go ahead and delete any of the shares from here. This is not permissible from the NAS, because the NAS won't be ownership of these shares. So I cannot just go ahead and delete from here. But what I can do, I can delete anything underneath the folders or the shares. Underneath the shares, if I have read and write permission to that particular share, for example music, I can go ahead and create data or maybe modify data, and I can delete anything underneath. But I cannot delete music, because this is a share, and only the NAS administrator from the web interface you can delete it. And since the NAS operating system has the ownership, but I do not have any ownership of this share, so I cannot just go ahead and delete from the client machine. So this is the basic configuration how do you do on for FTP configuration on a NAS device of Iomega Lenovo EMC. And one more thing I'm going to tell you here, if the device is running on a firmware version 3.2.x, in this case when you open up the FTP link from the Internet Explorer, you basically should get pools. Instead of now here I'm getting these shares directly, but you should get the pools directly first, and once you click on pools, it will get into the A folder. Once you click on A folder, it will go to A0, and under A0 you will have your shares. So this is the by design of the device of iX2 200C and iX4 200C. But whereas the other devices, which is the latest models coming up in the market, and the firmware version running on 4.0.x, maybe 4.0.2 or 4, 6, 8, on these devices with running firmware version 4.0.x, the shares would be directly accessible, which means that the design of pools AA0 has been removed, and there must be a soft link for that, and now the shares will directly be accessible. So this is the major difference you would find between iX2 series devices running 3.2.x series of firmware, and the latest model iX2, iX2DL, or maybe the iX4, PX4, PX12, iX12 running on firmware version 4.0.x. This will directly show you these shares. And if you want to configure your NAS as a FTP server for a public or maybe internet access, in that case you need to port forward from your router to the NAS IP address of these two ports, 20 and 21. If these two ports are port forwarded and enabled on your router, then you need to use your public IP and open up Internet Explorer the same way I've just shown you here. These resources should be accessible using the FTP. So this is the basic configuration and how do you do on the Iomega Lenovo EMC storage device. Thank you so much for watching.